suppose you're wondering why I called this meeting. We're going to do this very quickly because we don't have a lot of time and I want to get to the meat of things.
Whose water is this, yours or mine?
That is yours.
Okay, all right.
As some of you may know, Steve Hayes of the Weekly Standard has left town for a year to live in Spain, and so I needed another cheesehead to hang out with. And I picked this guy, and as Arthur Brooks is leaving the American Enterprise Institute as president, I thought we could really use another physical trainer, so we had him come here. So anyway, I'll spare you all the promotional plugs for my book. I will spare you all that sort of throat clearing, and as Henry VIII said to each of his wives, I won't keep you long. So, and he doesn't need an introduction.
I'm Paul. Hi.
Yeah. So I understand it's election season, midterms are coming up. You're going around for understandable reasons, touting how great the economy is doing, crediting it to the tax bill and other things, and pulling back regulations. Let's just stipulate, for the sake of argument, that the economy is doing great and that you deserve all of the credit, okay? Let's just stipulate. How's democracy doing?
It's resilient. It's the best system except for all the other systems, right? That's the Churchill line. I had to confess to him in the room back there that I love his book. I just haven't read it yet. And I think democracy is, in the 21st century era, facing new challenges that it had not had before. You have illiberalism on the rise in parts of the world. You have a rival model in China that is tantalizing to some. And then you have our own challenges with relativism on the rise, 21st century technology, and the ability to monetize division and, as you say, tribalism or identity politics. And those are really big challenges for democracy. It's the best system, but we have to continue to win these debates, and we're in one right now. And I feel good about winning it, but we've got to get on with winning it.
So one of my arguments would be that the way you win these debates is by first and foremost teaching people that debate is important.
Yeah.
But you and I both came up in Washington around the same time as 20-something policy gnomes at think tanks.
Yeah.
Gotta say, I stayed true to my roots. You strayed a bit. It's a disappointment to a lot of us. But it seems to me that on the right in particular, but also for lots of liberals, in the 1990s, it was agreed that arguments were important to have.
Yeah. And
we kind of have lost that. Why have we lost this idea that instead of it's simply, anything is worth doing if it results in drinking the tears of the enemy, right?
Yeah,
and my favorite New Yorker cartoon has two dogs drinking martinis at a bar, and one dog says to the other, it's not good enough that dogs succeed. Cats must also fail, right? And it seems to me that so much of our politics right now is more about cats must also fail than dogs must succeed. How did we get here?
That's a really good question. So that's what I wish I had a really good answer for, but I don't.
I know a book you can read that gives you part of the answer. But anyway, that's...
So that's why I'm excited about reading it.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for the answer, so maybe you could... That's a great question. And the way I look at this is... you think when we came of age, the Cold War was dying, and then we won, and we had classical liberalism. We all grew up in the age of Reagan. We read Hayek and Mises and Friedman and the Chicago School, and we studied Bastiat and Locke and all this stuff.
Nerds like you and I did.
Right,
But
the conservative movement.
Yes. Yeah.
The conservative movement was that. And we had little skirmishes between what we called neocons and paleocons, but we all had the same foundation. Mm. Now we've got this, we have zero-sum game thinking. And what's unfortunate is we've always thought that the zero-sum game, my gain comes at your loss, necessarily so, and it's zero-sum. We always thought that was an economic argument that we sort of had won. Mm-hmm. Now we're relitigating it on trade and everything else, but it's slipped into the rest of society, and that's the point. I think the rise of relativism, on top of that, in the old days, like the 90s, I thought identity politics was an Alinsky tool that the left used to basically get their base going. Not to get a majority of the country, but just to sort of get their base going. That's what we used to think of it. And so we sort of thought, we won this, that's over with. They do that, we don't, because we believe in aspirational, inclusive, politics. Well, here we are now, and both sides use it. We used to talk about Western civilization, which to us meant these classical liberal ideas. Now the blood and soil guys have sort of hijacked the term.
Right.
So we are back to zero-sum game thinking, identity politics being practiced with 21st century technology, a devastating effect that both sides now use. And so we got to go back and relitigate and re-win these fights again, which we took for granted that we won as conservatives. So not only do we have to win it on our side, we have to win it for a majority of the country. So I see relativism and technology as the accelerant that is now thrown in our face, that we've got to go back and relitigate these old lessons. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense. I mean, and Ronald Reagan liked to say we're never more than one generation away from tyranny because we're not born
That's right.
with liberty in our blood. We have to fight for it, right? Or as Hannah Arendt said, every generation Western civilization is invaded by barbarians. We call them children. Yeah. Which means that we actually have to teach children to be citizens, right?
That's right.
So that process of teaching children not to be barbarians, which we've had various degrees of success at the Goldberg household, is that starts in the first civilization in which we're born in, which is actually the family, right? And it seems to me, and part of my argument would be that so many of the problems that we have in Washington are downstream of the deeper problems that we have. The breakdown of the family, the breakdown of civil society. Right. And, people keep asking me what my public policy solutions are, and I don't have a lot, but one of them is push things down to the most local level possible.
Yeah.
I know you're sympathetic with that. How is that project going?
Yeah, we Catholics call it subsidiarity. It's a beautiful term that no one understands. It is. This is why one of my big pushes in my current vocation has been civil society and trying to elbow out, like we're underneath the basketball, trying to get some space for the rebound, space for civil society between the person and her government. I'm told you wrote about Life of Julia in your book. I wrote about it in the book I wrote in 2013. That is the progressive system, which squeezes out civil society. And the problem is, on the right, if we don't watch ourselves, we're going to squeeze it out as well. And so what we have to do is go back and open up civil society, which means re-limit government so that civil society can take its rightful place as the center of our society, the center of our community. And so civil society is a big term. It's family, it's community, it's church, it's everything. It's the space between ourselves and our government where we live our lives, where we use our minds to practice our vocations, to help others, and to go through the messiness of life where we enjoy being human. And that is getting crowded out ever so much because of illiberalism, because of progressivism, because of the Hegel-Weber administrative state crap, kind of seeped into our public policy.
Are you trying to seduce me, Speaker Ryan?
So with relativism, we've got a challenge as conservatives to go back and relitigate and reopen this space. The antidote is civil society. We all have our roles we play.
Sure.
For us, it's relimit government. That's why I believe in the agenda, the better way that we put through, which was to do just that, to try and open this space back up as much as we possibly can, so that those antibodies can come back and we can regrow the right stuff.
So, I warned you that there was an elephant in the room that we couldn't avoid talking about, but we don't have to dwell on it. My own personal view is that, President Trump is not the cause of all of our problems, but there are a lot of aspects of his presidency that are symptoms of a lot of our problems. Sure. As I try to keep telling people on the resistance sort of left, Donald Trump is not Hitler. Hitler could have repealed Obamacare.
That is really good. Is that in your book?
It's funny because it's true. Yeah. You can look it up. And but when you say that we have to push things back to civil society, and I agree with that entirely. The more you give people a sense that they actually have power over their own lives and that they know the names of the powers that be rather than as abstractions, the better off our democracy will be. And you'll still have culture wars, but the winners will have to look the losers in the eye because they'll see them at the kids' soccer game and everything else. So I agree with all of that. But when you have a president of the United States who comes along who says, and I will say in sort of populist, nationalist, right-wing terms, something that was said about Barack Obama as well. I alone can fix it.
Yeah.
Right? This idea that a single person as an expression of the people has the will and the power. You know, the rhetoric of conservatives that we grew up reading was that the government was too powerful, that it was filled with too many smart people who want to meddle too much. The rhetoric of the current president is that the government was too weak and too stupid, which is a significant departure from normal conservative rhetoric. If we're going to have these arguments, how do we deal with some of the arguments that we get coming out of
Yeah, I mean, so I would use different arguments if I were in that job, but what can I do as Speaker of the House or a guy in Congress? Pass the policies that actually advance our principles. Show the principles, again, work, so that we can have fresh evidence of our principles, but more importantly, advance what we believe is relimiting government. Take a look at the fact that we got 17 very important regulatory reform bills in law which relimit the administrative state. Mm-hmm. Take a look at the economic agenda, the national security agenda, the things that we all believe in, so that A, we have evidence that our principles put into policies work. We have new evidence of that. That's important to re-win and relitigate these debates, but also I think it's important that we kind of return power back to individuals and communities, which is what our agenda is doing, irrespective of populist rhetoric that's out there.
But there is this. So I agree with you. Edmund Burke said, "Example is the school of mankind, and he'll learn it no other." Sometimes you have to show people; you can't just tell people.
Yeah, little platoons.
And so, but at the same time, you alluded to this earlier about how we used to think identity politics was this fundamentally left-wing thing, right? And now there are big chunks of the sort of comment section right, for want of a better term, who are practicing a kind of identity politics for white people. Yeah. And it takes different forms. Many of them, I think, pernicious. Some just sort of silly. What can and should we do to actually push back on this?
Yeah, I think just intellectually do everything you can to defeat it. The alt-right is whatever I didn't know what the alt-right was until I had a primary opponent who claimed to be from the alt-right. These things give rise with different labels, but it is that.
Right.
And it is identity politics. It's antithetical to what we believe, and it's a hijacking of our terms. Just like the progressives hijacked the word liberalism, the blood and soil nationalists of the alt-right have hijacked things like Western civilization. Right. And so we have to go back and fight for our ground and re-win these ideas and marginalize these guys as best we can to the corners and show that these, not only, the problem we have is there's fresh evidence that stuff works. Mm-hmm. And like I said,
politically?
Politically it works. When you throw 21st century technology on there, and then people can make money doing it, that is a problem. So we have to do a better job, and this is where I wish I had better answers. This is what I look forward to having some time to think about this stuff. Yeah. How do we get the core back? How do we get back classical liberalism, properly understood, in the 21st century, so that we can relegate this stuff to the ash heap it belongs to, but unfortunately the ash heap kind of keeps coming back and growing. Right. Let's just get the ash heap growing so it's on the ash heap. That's the way I look at this stuff. But, I just think the right there are people who, they don't believe in classical liberalism if they believe in this kind of white identity politics. Right. That is not conservatism. That is racism. That is nationalism. That is not what we believe in. That is not the founding vision. That is not the founder's creed. That is not natural rights. That is not natural law. So what do we have to do? We have to go back and reteach and relitigate and relearn and re-expose people to these concepts. That's the way I see it.
I would also just, for the sake of argument, not for the sake of argument, just to assert it, say that one of the reasons you get this is because of the erosion of civil society.
Yes.
That when people no longer feel that the communities they live in are actual communities where they're respected or loved or welcome or whatever, they retreat to virtual communities, which are not remotely as satisfying. And the problem with places like Facebook, which has a lot of great things going for it, it's great for keeping up with old friends, it's not great for creating new communities.
Oh, and you can make money off of all the bad stuff. You can make money off of all the dark emotions within people.
But you also get people telling you, rather than disagreeing with you, you self-select and find people who already agree with everything you're doing and actually encourage you to spiral out even
Liebel
further.
and I were just talking about this in the car on the way over here. The math is part of our enemy right now. What is that? It's algorithms on websites and cable news that are basically saying, in order to survive this business model, hits, clicks, and ratings, you better project back to people what they want.
Right.
So you have these algorithms that are basically pulling us off into our corners, into our enclaves, seeing the other side as the enemy, and there goes civility and civil society. That is a huge challenge that we have. All the more reason why we're going to have to come up with better ways of rebranding, reclaiming, and reselling and retelling the story of natural law, natural rights, this beautiful thing that we have. You call it the miracle? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. This. And I promise to read the book to understand exactly.
The important thing is that you buy it. Really.
Yeah. It's already been done, yeah. So I feel bad. I've been a little busy with session. But we've got to go back and reclaim this ground. And I believe we can because we have insecure conservatives who are insecure about our beliefs that they only think certain people who are like them can have the capacity of believing this thing.
Right.
What I learned from Jack Kemp in my early 20s is you can go and proselytize democratic capitalism, free enterprise, especially in areas where they've never equated it, and you get new converts all the time.
Right.
That's secure conservatism.
Right.
That is something that we can't wait to share these ideas, especially with people who haven't been acquainted with them. That is not what insecure conservatives, alt-right, national populist, blood and soil people, that is not what they think. They think only people like me can possibly grasp these concepts or agree with me. And then you've got these industries going through this transformation using algorithms, just pumping stuff back to people what they want to hear. And this is the challenge we have in front of us.
Right. So
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Someone should write a book about that. And one of the things I always try to impress upon people is that one of the most radical things the Founding Fathers did in the Constitution never gets taught as being particularly important or interesting, which was getting rid of titles of nobility.
Yeah.
And which were aristocracy and titles of nobility and royalty and all that kind of thing were standard fare for 10,000 years after the Agricultural Revolution. That's one of the first forms of identity politics. It says that simply by accident of birth, some people are more deserving or more special than other people. Right? And what America did was say, no, everyone's going to start out sort of with a clean slate.
Yeah.
And so I think that stuff is hugely important, but I think what's more important is actually teaching people a sense of gratitude for how good we have, right? Because the opposite of gratitude, which is what we teach people today, is entitlement and resentment,
that's right?
Right?
That's
And which brings me, of course, to millennials. Damn kids. And we now have, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we now have unprecedented numbers of people who say that socialism is preferable.
Yeah.
We have this congresswoman who just won
She's not in Congress yet. But
soon to be, that's right.
Right, yeah.
Look, the New Republic has already told me that she's going to save the world.
Oh, yeah. But democratic socialism.
Who's running on democratic socialism?
Progressivism's too conservative and moderate. This is democratic socialism now. That's the hip and cool thing.
Do the members of... Because one of the reasons why this emerges is that the memory of the Cold War is gone, right? Yeah. And we don't teach people to be grateful for the incredible prosperity that we have. And so people say, oh, that looks pretty cool, because in part because that's sort of how our brains are actually wired. Do the members of your caucus have the vocabulary to talk about socialism, not in the context of rivers of blood and Stalin, but actually talk about it on the terms that younger people today are thinking about it?
Which members of my caucus are you referring to?
I'm
just kidding.
Mostly Louis Gohmert.
So, I am not going to touch that.
I didn't think you would.
So, I think, for the most part, yes. For the most part, yes. But what I worry about is we came of age when that was a fresh lesson and we all were steeped in it. And now we're victims of our success and we got lazy. And it's not being taught anymore. Then you have the progressives pushing constantly and building. The whole life of Julia, I think that's a great example. I forgot about that until I saw a reference about it in your book that I'm really excited about reading in the future. So the progressives are out there pushing the other side, which is emotionally attractive. It's emotionally appealing. And we conservative classical liberals took it all for granted and are not learning these lessons. And then you take a look at our educational system, and it's just not going our way. Mm-hmm. Again, why we need to decentralize, why we need civil society, why we need school choice, why we need all these things to go back and relitigate it. And how our new challenge is the 21st century digital age we're in, which makes it easier for us to revert back to our mean in society and not have this beautiful, exceptional miracle re-championed, which is what we all got to go do.
Switching gears a little bit, it seems to me that one of the things that makes Supreme Court fights so ugly, and to borrow a term from social science, so stupid, is because we've invested in the Supreme Court powers that it shouldn't have, right? If one of 9 justices basically has more power than Congress to do all sorts of things, of course we're going to treat it as a legislative branch, and we're of course going to spend money on it like it's a political campaign, right? Do you think that Judge Kavanaugh, I was about to call him Justice, do you think that with that appointment that we're going to see Democrats and Republicans sort of go back to where it's supposed to be and have these fights in the legislative or in the elected politics arena rather than use the courts?
Is this going to look like a campaign? Are you saying?
Yeah, what I'm saying is, are we going to, let's say for the sake of argument that we get Judge Kavanaugh on the bench, and let's say for the sake of argument the Supreme Court actually starts not legislating from the bench, but actually throwing these things back to the elected branch of government.
Chevron and things like that. Right.
How do you think that's going to change politics?
No, so I think, to your previous question, I think our members are getting there far better than where we were before. I think our majority was soft on philosophy in the early 2000s, lost our majority in some ways deservedly so. And I think a lot of us, I started this thing called Young Guns with Kevin and Eric, and that was to go back and find conservatives who could make us a more conservative majority. Different kinds of people arrive at conservatism. They arrive at it through pragmatism as a business person or a dentist or a think tanker. But we all are far more acquainted with these ideas. So the caucus is better now than it was in the old days. Mm-hmm. These judge fights bring that to a rise. Mm-hmm. And for instance, a lot of the agenda we ran on, a lot of it was about Article 1 versus the other articles. A lot of it was about the separation of powers. And we have a long ways to go to get back from where the progressive era took us. Right. But we're at least acknowledging it and going down that path. I hired new legislative directors in the Legislative Counsel's office to make sure we write really tight statutes so we don't give the executive branch a bunch of leeway. I just finished negotiating CFIUS reform to make sure that this and future administrations don't have all this discretion to regulate the economy. So we are more attuned to this than we were before. And these judicial fights clearly put us in that area. And those judicial fights, yes, I mean, he's probably going to pass, 51, 52, 53 votes? Right. My guess is 1 red state Democrat goes, probably 3 follow. Probably how this thing goes. I think he's going to get in. But 20 years ago, he probably would have gotten 65, 70 votes. So yes, we're back to tribalism. Yes, we're back to the progressives are more progressive and conservatives are what we just described. We're going to have this, but what the lesson comes out of this is judicial activism versus strict constructionism. So at least we're back to arguing about the Constitution. Right. 10 years ago, we didn't really have those arguments. Yeah. We do now.
If anyone had CFIUS reform and Paul Ryan bingo, congratulations. So one last question, and then we have time for just 2 questions from the audience, and I will rule with an iron fist about who gets picked. So one of my peeves these days, because I'm so cool, is about Article 1 supremacy. I'm more and more of a Congress is the. It's
me
not,
too.
They're not co-equal branches, right?
Yeah, right.
Congress is actually, people say, well, foreign policy is completely the president's. No, well, you guys get to declare war, which is not exactly a trivial part of foreign policy, and you pay for this thing called the military. So, but it seems to me that one of the reasons why a politician on the right or the left can come forward and campaign on I alone can fix it, right?
Yeah.
Or as I think Barack Obama put it, people of Earth, stop your bickering. I'm Barack Obama, and I'm here to help. Is that because Congress has over the last century,
Delegated.
outsourced,
Absolutely,
created basically a fourth branch of government,
major ways,
right?
Yes.
So personally, I know you have feelings about trade. We don't have to get too deep in the weeds on that, but the president is not supposed to have this kind of power on trade. You are, basically, right? How goes the process or the project of clawing back the power that the founding fathers actually wanted?
Well, trade is where we have the most work to do.
Yeah.
Because about 100 years ago, they passed these laws that give so much discretion. And what president's going to reduce their power when you put a bill like that on their desk? So you have to go with different routes. This is a project that's going to take a long time, but we have been serious about this. First of all, one of the first bills I put on the floor in this session was what we call the REINS Act. Major rules and regulations.
That was in my Paul Ryan bingo. I mean, that was a gimme. But anyway,
that's right. Major rules and regulations come back to Congress for final vote, approval, or amendment before they go into effect, so that we have final say-so on the laws. That, to me, is one of the most important things we could do to rein in the administrative state, unelected bureaucracies writing laws. Very, very important. One of the first things we did. I guarantee you Chuck Schumer will filibuster this to the day he dies. That is obviously, so what frustrates us in the House, 800 bills we've passed, about 550 of them sitting in the Senate. A lot of those first Article 1 bills that we passed are sitting over there because of the filibuster, and that's the frustration for us in the House. So what do? We make sure we write smart appropriation bills. What do? We write a Russia sanctions bill that we bring to the floor that gets huge vote count, so that the president has no choice but to sign it. We did that about a year ago.
Right.
What do? We make sure that the way we draft our laws, we write them very tightly because we know Chevron's gotten out of control, and we don't want the administrative state, no matter who is president. And our experience off of the Obama experience is we better write these things really tightly.
Right.
So we do that. We do basically the REINS Act kind of thing in the way we write statutes now. So we're very cognizant of this, and then we want to make sure that Mitch, who's done a very good job on this, gets really good judges on the bench to try and reverse this trend. So don't think that this is not on the front of our minds. It is. We are legislating this way, but we need to have a bigger vote count in the Senate to actually get these things on the president's desk signed into law. And the president does support these bills. Where we do have an issue is on trade. The president, as all previous presidents in our lifetimes, has had a lot of discretion on trade. I wrote the TPA law. The TPA law was one example recently where we got more legislative power into the trade space. Not nearly as much as we'd like, but we clawed back a lot from the administration on trade. So we're making progress, just not albeit as fast as we'd like.
Okay, so first question. I'm supposed to pick people I recognize for fear of terrible things going on, but I'll go with this guy in the front because it's easy.
Please wait for the mic, and
Yes.
we actually only have time for one question.
Okay, oh my gosh, the pressure on you is enormous.
This better be good.
Yeah.
Who are you?
And
No
please,
socks, sandals, just kidding.
please make your statement in the form of question, too.
Do you gentlemen view the Federal Reserve as a center of power that should be reined in?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in a fixed rule. So, I mean, I can go on and on. I believe you do want to keep the Fed. I do believe in independence in the Fed. I do believe in auditing. I do believe in having clear books. And I do believe we should have a standard, a fixed rule that we govern the Federal Reserve on. And the Humphrey-Hawkins law gives the Fed, first of all, it puts into the Fed's statute the bogus, I won't get into the Phillips curve, it puts into it the wrong, I won't go into the...
Bingo.
Okay, Phillips curve, yeah, sorry. You're just like scratching my itch. So the Fed should have explicit rules, should have an explicit rule, and should govern itself by that, and it should be made clear. That takes away, that gets us off of fiat money onto a fixed standard that is a reliable source of value where we know exactly what our money is, so that we cannot have debasement by the Federal Reserve, which takes away our livelihoods. So, but, the last thing I want to do is get politicians involved in meddling with interest rates in the Federal Reserve. So you want to make sure that you keep this thing away from political interference and meddling, and this is not a Vladimir Putin statement, away from political interference and meddling, but have a standard that is objective, that is adhered to, and transparent, so that we're getting away from the fiat money days and we're not debasing our currency in the future. And as the world's reserve currency, this is an exorbitant privilege that we could abuse if we don't watch ourselves. We passed this bill as well. We actually passed, so Bill Huizenga from the Financial Services Committee, along with Jeb Hensling, have passed legislation, a bill that says the Fed has to put out this kind of rule and has more transparency. So the House has actually acted on these rules, rewriting Humphrey Hawkins, which is the statute that governs the Fed. I can guarantee you Chuck Filibuster, yeah. Chuck Filibuster will Schumer this bill.
I see a hashtag forming as we speak. Anyway, I want to thank the speaker. He had very tight time. We wanted to have a longer conversation, but this is what we could work out because of really my pressing schedule. And one thing I do ask is that everybody stay in the seats or where they are until the speaker goes, and then I'll talk for another hour and a half on my book. No, but I want to thank everybody.
Join me in making sure we all read his book. All right.
There you go.
The pitch. All right. Thanks. Hey, thank you.
Yeah. I hope this is what.
Yeah.